For the most part, I'm into DC Comics, especially Batman and Superman, and some other DC characters as well. But there's only one Marvel title that I really enjoy, and that is the X-Men. And for the most part, that's the main Marvel title that I really enjoy. There are a few other Marvel titles that I've read, such as some Captain America, some Avengers, a little bit of Ms. Marvel, and recently I've been reading Deadpool. I've read and enjoyed Dazzler. Yes, you heard that right. Yes, I like this character. Get over it. Overall, though, it's the X-Men that I like the most. Their associated teams, their characters, shall we say, the X-Men universe. That I like overall. But I've not always read X-Men comics. It's only in recent years that I've read about them. Now, just a bit of backstory. I was born in 1974. I vaguely recall my cousin having issue 94 and 95 when they first came out. And that's the beginning of the all-new, all-different team. And I believe I looked at these issues, but that was pretty much it for a long time. I saw ads for the comics, such as, say, Fall of the Mutants, and other stories of that time period. I saw ads for, but I didn't actually read the comics. I think the first thing I read was the trade X-Men vs. Fantastic Four, and that's the very first X-Men related thing I've read. But the second was the graphic novel, which is X-Men Brew Trouble in the Big Easy. And that's the first wholly X-Men comic that I ever read. It's not until later that I read more, but more on that later. It's not until later years that my interest in the X-Men developed. I saw them in cameos of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I saw the animated movie Pride of the X-Men, and I liked it because it's so 80s. It's very much like the 80s cartoons such as G.I. Joe, such as Transformers. But my first real introduction to the X-Men was the 90s cartoon. And I think that is true of a lot of people. I was 18 when this cartoon first came out. And this cartoon very much spoke to me as a young man at this time period. I'm a part of Generation X, which is, people who were born in the early 60s, born in the 70s, or born in the 80s. As someone of that time period, the, cartoon spoke to me as a young person. And, it very much embraced the 90s and the time period. But it paid tribute to the past. It adapted stories from the 70s. And, to me as a person of that time, it's that really got me into the X-Men. And it's every aspect of this cartoon that I really enjoy. And that includes Jubilee. Yeah, I know what you're going to say. I like Jubilee, not Vampire Jubilee. Jubilee as she originally was. Because she is, a kid of the early 80s and, 90s. She's a person of that time period. That spoke to me then. That still speaks to me. But the point is, I like this cartoon, and, it adapted, or paid tribute to the X-Men stories up to that point, from the 60s, 70s, 80s to the early 90s. such as the Phoenix storyline, such as Days of Future Past. And, it used, a new character, Cable, or at least, he was new at that time. And let's not forget, Weapon X was released in '91. And that's the story where, Wolverine gets his adamantium claws. So to a person of the '90s, that was new and fresh. People today, knowing the Weapon X story, that's commonplace. To us, it was new and, never been seen before. And, so this cartoon, I think it's the best X-Men cartoon. And there are, there's other cartoons. I like also Wolverine and the X-Men. This series, I feel, adapts stories post-90s, Ultimate X-Men, New X-Men, but it pays tribute to the past. However, 90s series, it's the best X-Men cartoon there is. Second best, but first. So, that's my first introduction to the X-Men. And the other is the live-action movies. And, in my opinion, I think they're the best X-Men movies ever made. Even if Marvel gets the rights, I don't think they'll do them as well. And, okay, fine. Later X-Men movies aren't as good. But these first two, I think, are the best. They're at the top of the spectrum. X-Men Last Stand is at the lower end of the spectrum. And don't even get me started on Wolverine Origins. I'm a fan of First Class. I'm a fan, I loved Days of Future Past. But these two movies, I think, are the best. But perhaps they're tough acts to follow. Now, the first movie, I liked that we get to see what it's like to be a mutant. We see Magneto, a victim of the Holocaust, who fears that something like this is going to happen again. We see Rogue, who is watching a mother tenderly touch her son on the cheek. And Rogue knows that she's never going to have this again. We identify with that. There's things like Mystique, who says she was afraid to go to school every day. Granted, this was retconned later in movies, but let's just deal with this movie, So, basically this movie has, various elements and things that are set up. Granted, Rogue and Wolverine are the center focus. But, there are, and there are other characters that sometimes left aside. But, overall, I think it showed X-Men as a team very well. And, they're at their best. They're fighting to save mankind from the plots of, mutants that would do them harm. Which is the essential element of the X-Men. And, they don't ask for a reward. There are other elements, such as, Magneto versus Xavier and their associate teams supporting them. Both lock heads and fight over their ideas. Both, believe that their ideas are right. And, there are nods to the comics, such as Wolverine getting Rogue to adapt his power. That's from the comics. Wolverine's very first time with Rogue, that's exactly what he does. And there are other elements, things that are set up, but sadly, they are misused in the future. Things like, say, Sabretooth being interested in Wolverine's dog tags. But, again, in my opinion, I think this is the best X-Men movie. The second movie, was very different, but I think it was very good. And for the most part, it's dealing with humans and their fear of X-Men and mutant kind. And who are willing to go to extremes to take out mutants. So it's about, humans against X-Men. Here the ideals of Magneto and Stryker are clashing. Stryker wants to take down all mutants. But Magneto, he says, well, if you're going to play by those rules, I'm going to do the same thing. And overall, I felt the X-Men as a team did well in this movie. So these first two movies, I think, have so much potential, which is somewhat wasted in later movies. But, again, the point is that these first two movies, they're something else that got me interested in the comic. I've collected a lot of their trades over the years, and I've read a lot. I've been reading their 60s era via Marvel Masterworks. And I like this time period for what it is. It's, the weird Silver Age 60s themes, and, I find it amusing that this is not when they're at their most popular. And, but, as most people know, you can bookend this time period from their start, Stan Lee, Kirby, their mushy middle, as some call it, to the Roy Thomas, Neil Adams time period. Which, and make no mistake, that this time period is what people got interested in X-Men again. And I've been reading their early 70s and 80s era via Marvel Masterworks. And I've collected all 11 volumes of that trade. And that is all of Chris Claremont's run writing that team, those 11 volumes. And I'm I've been very interested in reading, the Phoenix storyline, the Dark Phoenix storyline. And I've been very much enjoying them. But I won't go into everything. Suffice it to say, I like these stories and the comic of this time period. And, I've read a few others. The thing that I think overall that appeals to me is the idea of the outsiders. That the X-Men are outsiders. They're shunned. They're hated by others. They're outcasts. They're not accepted by others. And that perhaps is something that speaks to me. It's something that I identify with on certain levels. And despite the fact that they're outsiders, they fight to save others. They fight to save the lives of people who hate them. I like this idea. It's an interesting concept, and I think it's the one thing that drives the comic. Yes, it is a superhero comic. It always was. It always will be. So it has the superhero tropes and cliches, but there's still that underlying element that they're fighting for others, but they're unaccepted for others. They save others, but they're never thanked. That was there at the beginning, and it's always been there. And the other thing I like is that they're born with their powers. Marvel has had a lot of, powers via radiation. Spiders, gamma rays, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. During the 60s, there's the little bit of we may have gotten our powers because our parents worked on the atomic bomb, and there's little elements like that, but thankfully that's kind of forgotten about in later years. So I kind of like that they're born with their powers, that they may be the next stage of evolution. I'm much more interested in that idea. And just the idea that that they're born with these abilities. And that, again, that they fight to save others. So that is those are the reasons that I like X-Men and their comics and, as I said, their universe. And that's just what I wanted to share today.